you're always going to have more of an opportunity to work on yourself internally and externally. And when you get external results, you learn more about yourself internally. At least you have the option to. And when you learn more about yourself internally, you have options to change your external world as well.
What matters is what we learned along the way. That stuff is perpetual. And so I think that's really the idea here is let's get a hold of our expectations in advance so that we don't have to constantly be playing this sort of unwinnable game.
Next Level Nation, welcome back to another episode of Next Level University, where we help you level up your life, your love, your health, and your wealth. We hope you enjoyed yesterday's episode number 1547, Scarcity, Abundance, and How They Affect Your Growth. Sounds like a book title. Today, for episode number 1548, an open conversation about expectations. So Alan has mentioned, have you mentioned the name of the book that you've been reading on here?
I don't think so.
Okay, there's a book Alan is reading, and when Alan gets super excited about a book, he recommends it / forces me to read it. In this case, it was the second one, where I was forced to read it with love, not in a bad way.
Yeah, it's world class.
It's a very good book, and I'll let you give the name and all that, because I don't remember it, but we'll get there. And in one of the first chapters, they're talking about expectations. And how expectations are really, really dangerous, because even if your quality of life increases, your expectations then increase, and then unfortunately you fall into the same pattern of not having everything that you want. And realistically, we're never going to have everything we want. But I thought having an open conversation about expectations would be valuable, because I don't think we talk about ours very often, which might allow you as the viewer or listener to hopefully increase self-awareness. And, second piece, I was recommending a movie to Alan, Oppenheimer. I recommended it for months and months and months and months. Mm-hmm. And when Alan saw it, he said, it was a little underwhelming. And he said, one of the reasons is because your expectations, you created so many expectations based on you saying it was amazing and you telling me I needed to see it, and I would love the math and this and this and this. So that's another piece where we can go with this episode, is your expectations oftentimes determine the outcome, your experience. Your expectations determine your experience. That's a very, very early next level nugget for this episode.
You also just did this with It's a Wonderful Life.
I did. I got to stop doing it.
No, it's overselling something, but it's not necessarily overselling. I mean, for all you know, it's going to be that good.
I think it's going to be that good for you, this one. But I thought Oppenheimer was too, so who knows?
Who knows? For those of you who are long-term listeners, you'll remember this. For the new listeners, I will provide context. I loved Avatar 2. I also loved Avatar 1. It was 2009, and I had never seen a preview for the movie. And I went to IMAX in Providence Place Mall. And with no preview, I had no idea the movie existed. It was just, I was in my college bubble at the time, and me and my college friends went to see it, and I was blown away. Whoa. Can you imagine having no expectations and then going to see Avatar? It was unbelievable. One of the best experiences. Yeah, one of the best experiences of my life. It's wild to say that out loud. Okay. Then, 11 years later, I think, he came out with Avatar 2. And I was so pumped. I think it was 11 years later. 2009 to 2022, I think.
2009 to 2022 is 13 years, I believe.
13 years. But why am I thinking 11 years?
That I don't know.
I just remember James Cameron talking about how it took 11 years later or something like that. Doesn't matter. Here's the point. I went and saw Avatar 2 in X Plus Theater, one of those really comfy theaters with the Amelia 3D, sort of like IMAX, but not IMAX. And it was unbelievable, even better than the first one. But my expectations were definitely higher because I went into the first one never having seen a preview, never having understood James Cameron or what was going on with Avatar, that world. I knew James Cameron as a director, Terminator, all that stuff, but I had never known that Avatar existed. And then it was like, whoa. Then I had higher expectations for the next movie. It still blew my mind. It did. It still blew me out of the water. And pun intended, it's called The Way of Water. Beautiful movie. And I told the audience, I told the podcast listeners, I told everyone I could talk to, basically all my clients, I said that was the best cinematic experience I've ever had, which is saying something because I'm obsessed with movies and I've been going to the movies ever since I was a kid. I used to ride my bike to the movies on the reg. One of my clients disliked the movie so much that she left the theater.
I respect it.
I know you do. And her and I were on a coaching session, and she confronted me. And it was playful and fun, but I realized that I overhyped the movie so much that she was expecting something very different. And so the idea in Morgan Housel's book, it's called Same as Ever, and it's unbelievable. So if you do love books, this is one of my top 10 books. Hands down, it's unbelievable. I just finished it. It's so good. But essentially what it talks about is what has never changed, what's never going to change, what's always been true, what's always going to be true. And it's fundamental principles. So we talk a lot on this podcast about principles. Self-worth is always going to be a thing, always has been a thing, always will be a thing, versus nuances of, Clubhouse versus TikTok versus Instagram. Social media has always been a thing in some ways. Media has always been a thing. Social media became a thing in the early 2000s, MySpace days, all that, and then it will always be a thing. Social media from now on will always be a thing, assuming, things continue trending in the same direction. On this podcast, we like to talk about things that will always be a thing because we are all unique. You are all unique. Movies and your preferences in movies are unique. Your expectations are unique. Your goals are unique. Your core values and core aspirations and core beliefs are unique. Your thought processes are unique. But what never changes in this podcast is personal growth, self-improvement, health, wealth, and love. So, expectations. In the book, Morgan Housel is talking about how the goalpost always moves. That's why it can be so difficult. We had a listener who's in group coaching talk about how she is listening to episode 49, 50, 51, 52, 53, 54. And Kevin and I playfully, in the WhatsApp group for group coaching, said, why are you...
Don't do that.
Why are you listening to those episodes? That's like going back and watching a movie from the 50s or from the 60s or from the 80s or whatever. The CGI is not as good. The film... the video camera that it was filmed on is not very good. As a matter of fact, if you have an iPhone, you probably have a better camera than what It's a Wonderful Life was recorded on. Definitely. Yeah. But the storytelling and the character development and the acting was probably really good in It's a Wonderful Life. I'm presupposing. I've never seen it, but most likely. So here's what we live in a world where we have these expectations. Most of the time it's unconscious. The moment we make more money, we immediately up the ante and change the goalpost. And so the idea here is you're sailing to the horizon, but the horizon never gets any closer. And so if you do believe that you are going to be happy when you get your BMW, or when you achieve that goal weight, or when XYZ, you are wrong, and so am I. Rather than what we encourage is this idea that you're achieving your way to the unachievable and that that's a good thing because growth and contribution and meaning come from progress. And so, no, it's kind of weird when we hit our financial goals in 2024. Kevin and I are not going to suddenly be happy. The moment we hit them, we're going to up the ante. Yeah, we'll have a little dopamine hit. Good job, strong work. What matters about hitting that goal is not the goal. What matters is building self-belief. What matters is the self-worth of look who we became to achieve it. What matters is what we learned along the way. That stuff is perpetual. And so I think that's really the idea here is let's get a hold of our expectations in advance so that we don't have to constantly be playing this sort of unwinnable game.
What do you think is more important, internal success or external success? And I don't know, I think they're probably the same level of importance, but what's your take on that?
I really appreciate the question. I think that's the question. So I will start
agree.
this with, that's a great question to consistently live in. I think internal, but I think you can take that too far, and I have. I went from very externally.
You're trying to ride the deer in the woods. That you're going to tell that story?
yeah. If you want to tell that story for context,
there was a time.
Probably should.
Yeah, there was a time in Alan's life where he got so centered in his words, where he thought he could go into the woods and he could just energetically speak to the deer and then approach them and befriend them. And maybe he could. I don't know. I'm not saying he couldn't. But
I got to the point where they didn't run away.
But you also...
I wasn't that close to them. I was in the same sort of... I would say I was probably 100 feet away, something like that.
And at this point, were you financially abundant or
no,
quite the opposite?
No, I was energetically abundant. Yeah, I was very fit and I was living my best life, but not external results-wise. Nothing about my finances or my car or my home. None of that external material success was a thing, but internally I was super fulfilled. I was fit, super fit. And I definitely loved my life. And I loved myself.
So
but not from an ego place.
Well, even right now, there's two potential thoughts for anybody watching or listening is, if I had that, there's two expectations that come up. If I had that, this would happen. If I had that, then this would happen. So even that is another tributary of the same river, so to speak. But
it's a great question, Kevin. I want to answer it this way. I've met a lot of people with external success that are deeply unfulfilled. And I've also met a lot of people with that are deeply fulfilled that have very little external success. And neither one of them, in my honest opinion, was appealing to me. When I was externally successful at the expense of my own fulfillment, I thought that I would rather be internally fulfilled and not externally successful. But unfortunately, in the practical reality of the world, I needed money to be free. You can't sustain that and live in a home and start a family and have a car and travel and, So the answer to your question is they both matter deeply. I would say inner fulfillment matters more than external success, but I think that everyone kind of needs both.
What's going on, guys? My name is Austin, and I've been working with Kevin for a few months now. If there's one thing that I find super valuable is his expertise on how to position the podcast to the right audience and fit the content into the overall business plan. And frankly, when we work together, he challenges me a lot. There were some tough conversations that he initiated with me so that I can really grow in the business. Besides the coaching part, the editing team does amazing work with editing and show notes and staying on top of all communications. Overall, my experience working with Kevin has really been top-notch.
I am in agreement with that. I think if you work on yourself so diligently internally, the external world doesn't necessarily affect you as much.
Yeah.
Now, obviously, there's still requirements and necessities and things that help circumstances. But I don't think it's the opposite, where if you have a ton of money, the external world doesn't affect you. Yeah, you have opportunity and you have different circumstances, but when you go to bed at night, you still have the same thoughts in your head. I don't think the money's not going to change the thoughts in your head. The money is a mask for a lot of things, but so isn't being so transcendent that nothing externally affects you. That's also potentially kind of a mask as well. But
yeah, and both are dangerous. Because if you think about someone who is so internally centered and fulfilled that they end up not eating as often, or some people take it really, really, really extreme. And I don't know if I'm explaining this properly, but it's almost like they could have done more. They could have become more. I have one person I'm thinking of right now who's a sweetheart, wonderful human being, but she's not maximizing her potential, and I know that it bothers her, even though she's very fulfilled and centered, and she's definitely not wealthy, and she's never gonna be. And that kind of sucks because people like her, I want to be more wealthy. I want them to strive more and achieve more. I think the world would be a better place if there was more people like that. Versus the opposite, I know someone who's deeply insecure and unfulfilled, but very externally successful. Yep. And because of that, they have way more impact. I think that's what I'm going to get to, is there's so many people who are such wonderful human beings who have so much less impact because the influence of their material things is not noticeable from the outside looking in. I think fulfillment from the inside looking out is really important. It's so critical. But it doesn't guarantee that from the outside looking in, you're going to have influence. Because people are influenced by nice things. They're influenced by things they value. And for the less transcendent, quote unquote, it's tough sometimes to look up to someone who doesn't have things that you value, particularly if it's things that you think you want, like that new car or that new home or whatever. So I think both is the key. And when it comes back to expectations, if you expect external success to fulfill you, external success alone to fulfill you, it will help. But if you expect external success alone to fulfill you, you're in trouble. If you expect to be able to be fulfilled without any external success, I actually think you're also in trouble.
Interesting.
And I've been there on both of those.
Yeah, I can't imagine myself being fulfilled without some level of external success just because I value that. I value the certainty and the opportunity and that stuff.
And the significance and the growth and the contribution and the...
Yeah.
I mean, I think that's very honest of you. I do. I think it's very mature and honest of you. I think most
scary.
people...
It's scary to admit.
Of course.
It can
because it can be very polarizing, you know?
Yeah.
People always say don't tie your self-worth to anything external, and I just think that's impractical. I think I understand the idea underneath it, but I mean, I have an Apple Watch, and I have this really nice shirt, and my hair is done up. I have this nice, beautiful backdrop with a nice camera, a great microphone. I live in a, beautiful condo with Emilia. She's beautiful. I mean, could I be fulfilled without any of that? Probably. Could I be as fulfilled? Definitely not. Definitely not. I tried. I tried. And there's just no version of I think that's a very, I think a lot of people who are into Buddhism would disagree with me, but I think the idea that you can be entirely fulfilled without any external results, I do think that's a fugazi. I think that's just as dangerous as thinking that, fame or success will fulfill you.
A very hyper-conscious episode. If you sense my energy being off, whether you're watching or listening, I'm just very tired. I got a very bad sleep score last night. I stayed up too late. Yesterday was the Next Level Hope Foundation event, which was wildly successful. But I'll tell you, shout out to all the parents who are chasing around kids because it is humbling and I did not get enough sleep, so I am running on close to E. I would say this. This is my thesis, and this will be my next level nugget. There's nothing wrong with moving the goalposts as long as you understand that moving the goalpost and accomplishing it is probably not going to do that much because you're going to end up moving the goalposts again. I don't think moving the goalposts is a bad thing because you're going to accomplish more than you would have if you didn't, most likely. But to your point, if it's the if-then, if I get to this goalpost, then I will feel a certain way. I don't know if you can do that if you don't work on yourself internally. I don't know. Maybe you can if you don't have external results. I don't know. I've never tried to do it that way, really. Because even from the very beginning, we weren't focused on making money, but I knew I had to make money to survive and to provide for an eventual family.
Can you quickly tell that story about being fulfilled even though you were the least externally successful you'd ever been?
I woke up one morning. I lived with my best friend Matt at the time. Matt was out of the house for the day. I woke up. I walked out into the kitchen, and I remember just walking around the kitchen, the brokest I'd ever been, unreasonably single, with not a prospect of love in my life. The podcast we were doing the podcast, but nobody really cared. We didn't really have any level of success. But I was the least successful externally I'd ever been, but I felt the most internally successful, self-aware, fulfilled, proud that I had ever felt. It was a really good feeling. I felt whole. Maybe that's the best way to explain it. I felt whole as a human. But I didn't have any money, so I was scarce. I felt abundant in who I was as Kevin, but I felt scarce with what I was able to do and how long I was going to be able to last. But I also had a time where I was listening to Deepak Chopra and Sadhguru every day, and I was very spiritual, and that was a really good place for me. But I was also very focused on making money because those are the years I couldn't afford to buy Christmas presents for Taryn. So I don't know if I've ever just tried to do one without the other. I don't know if I've ever done that. What's worked really well for me is understanding, now I understand this, I didn't at the beginning. When you move the goalposts, that's okay. That's a good thing. It's not a bad thing. But if you have the expectations that the next place you park the goalpost is going to be the place where everything comes together, I don't really think that's ever going to happen, because you're always going to have more of an opportunity to work on yourself internally and externally. And when you get external results, you learn more about yourself internally, at least you have the option to. And when you learn more about yourself internally, you have options to change your external world as well. Set up in this weird way.
Last question real quick. I know we got to jump.
Sure.
So you talk about how you were the least externally successful you'd ever been, but you felt whole and abundant internally.
It's the best way to explain it, yeah.
But before that, it was the opposite. You were externally successful, but internally not whole. Yes. Can you talk about that briefly?
Yeah, I was making six figures. There were times where I would have checks for $2,000 that I just wouldn't cash because I didn't have time and I didn't really need the money, so I just wait and go cash them all together. But I didn't know myself at all. I didn't have any connection to self-awareness. I didn't know why I was insecure. I didn't know why I was depressed. I didn't know why I was anxious. I didn't understand myself. I felt very lost. I felt very stuck. I wasn't proud of what I was doing, and I felt empty. I think empty and full are the two best ways to explain it. I felt like I was just doing everything I was doing forever, hoping that eventually I'd do the right thing that made me feel good. When the other way was I was doing things that I loved doing and I felt really good, but I was waiting for success, external success. So one time I had all the external success, but I felt like a huge failure internally. I didn't know myself at all. The other time I had all what felt like the success internally, but I had none of the external success and I felt like an external failure.
It's so wild how the first one, you're externally successful, but you're not sure you want to live like this for the long term. Whereas the opposite was, listen, I love my life and I love who I am reasonably, but how do I play this longer?
Yeah.
You know, and you talked about suicidal ideation on the other side. So I would say, to answer the original through line of this episode, and we'll jump, is I think the first one is worse than the second one, but neither one of them is the whole game. I think you need external and internal success, and I think that you need goalposts for both. And when growth is the goal, you become fulfilled because you always are going to get that. When growth and contribution are the goal, you're always going to get that because you're never not contributing. You're never not growing. Even if external success doesn't come for one of our monthly meetups, for example, we still get to grow and contribute.
Yeah.
And then a lot of times success comes eventually too. So I think that you kind of win. You opt out of the unwinnable game of constantly moving the goalposts, hoping you're successful. And you opt into a winnable game where even if 3 people show up, we're going to grow and we're going to contribute.
Very well said.
And hopefully, thank you. And hopefully eventually success comes from that. And I do believe it does. If you do a good job at it and, learn money and all that kind of stuff. So we'll talk about wealth on another episode. That's my next level nugget is external success without internal success is not success. Internal success without any external success is not sustainable. And so try to work on both.
And that's the whole premise of life, love, health, and wealth. Everything 360. I believe success is all of those things. That's my frame because I want to be able to give back and I want to be able to provide for my family and I want to be able to have the abundance to do this and grow and evolve and all that. If you are looking for more well-rounded, quote-unquote success, holistic success, please join our private Facebook group, Next Level Nation, where there's always conversations going on about growth. I know we had something in there about my recent conversation about Titanic, so get in there. and let us know what you think about Titanic. Link will be in the show notes, as always.
The group coaching program that you've heard many times before, unless you're a new listener, in which case it's the first time you're hearing about it. 12 weeks, 6 sessions with connection calls in between. We're going to be there with you every step of the way, like-minded, growth-oriented individuals, support, inclusivity, accountability. Group coaching is one of the only programs that I've ever personally seen that is holistic. You're going to learn physical, mental, emotional, spiritual health. You're going to learn wealth, how to create it, sustain it, and you're going to learn love and relationships. Friends, family, intimate relationships, colleagues, mentors, mentees, clients. It's very, very holistic. 90 days with a group of like-minded people, and it's unreasonably affordable. You can go to the landing page right now. The link will be in the show notes. There's a video on there. We need to update the video because it's a little bit scripted, but the information's there good. There is good. The information there good. The information in the video is rock solid, but Kevin and I are basically just talking to the camera, reading the script.
We were trying to figure it out.
We were trying to figure it out back then. We got to redo that. But check that out. All the information you need is there. And with the promo code, hashtag NLU listener. I don't know why I said hashtag NLU listener. Use promo code NLU listener and you'll get 30% off at checkout, and it comes to $97 per month for the 3-month program. And you can pay month to month with an option that we have available on the website. Check that out. We hope you join us. We've already got a couple spots locked, and Group 13 is going to be awesome.
Tomorrow, for episode number 1549, this might be a controversial one. It's not your responsibility to fix anyone. I'm going to tell a story that it's easy to talk about now, but in the past, it was something that was very close to home and definitely something that shifted me and shaped me into who I am today. So that is what we will talk about tomorrow. As always, we love you. We appreciate you. Grateful for each and every one of you. And at NLU, we do not have fans. We have family. We will talk to you all tomorrow.
Keep succeeding internally and externally. Next Level Nation.